All right, hope you're having a good weekend. I'm just going to make this real quick. Hopefully we'll get through part of the 6.1 and we'll have some stuff to do in class on Monday or Tuesday, depending if you're A day or B day. Chapter 6 is one of the more challenging chapters, so make sure you have a piece of paper out, full sheet of paper with you. So if you don't pause it, get that right now, and then we'll go and get started. Chapter 6, pages 142 through 165. Might also be beneficial if you have your textbook with you as well. And what we're going to focus in on is energy of the cell, which is 6.1. So, a little background and information. Every living thing, like this guy right here, okay, he has to have energy. Okay, so that's an orangutan. Orangutans are vegetarians. He's eating little veggies, okay? It has to have food. All living things require energy to function. And one of the things that we talked about in previous units, actually the very first chapter, we talked about the food pyramid. And we said that, we got our primary, you can go ahead and draw this on your notes right now, consumers down here. You got your secondary here. That's the things that eat them. You can put examples like cows, pigs, things like that, okay? Then you got our omnivores that are going to be up here, humans, pigs, things that eat both vegetation, that'll eat both the vegetation, and they'll also eat other things that eat vegetation. Then we got our tertiary predators or top predators here. The thing that's important for us to realize is that each one of these locations, each time that food goes up the food pyramid, every time it does this, we're only going to pass on about 9/10 of the energy. That's it. Most of it is going to be lost, okay? Or excuse me, let me correct that. 1/10 is going to be passed on, 9/10 is lost. What's it lost to? Well, it's lost to heat. It's going to be lost to movement, to building new structures. It's not going to be passed on the energetic level. So the key is that we must see how energy is transferred and how these guys up in these pyramids up here, how they're able to take the energy from the plants and convert it into usable energy. So 6.1 is basically that's it. Taking that 1/10 of energy that we get, take the 1/10 of energy that we get, how do we use it? So, when we look at this, we need a term endergonic. Now, we've heard endo before, E-N-D-O. Now, this is just similar. We talked about endosymbiosis. We talked about endothermic reactions. Gonic means energy. Ender means to take in. So it's when energy is taken in. Any energy that is available to do work in your body is called free energy. Okay? So any energy that we have available to do something, we call it free energy. And in order for organisms to carry out any life process, to reproduce, to grow, to develop, to contract muscles, to transport ions, to synthesize proteins, all of that needs to have energy to do that. And what we'll do is we actually take chemical energy, so energy stored in chemical bonds, okay? We will take that energy, we'll break it, and use it to do reactions in an energonic way. Now you can draw this diagram. The products of an energonic reaction have higher potential energy than the reactants. What does that simply mean? That our reactants are down here. Okay, that's our starting material. Our products are up here. So for example, if I were to take CO2 and water, okay, I'm going to end with glucose up here. Notice that as we look, the energy, the potential energy increases in our diagram. That's a P, by the way. And what happens, in order to go from this lower energy to a higher energy state, okay, we need to input energy. And we do that in the form of light energy, right, in the form of the sun. So once again, all this is if we take a look at it, again, reactants, products, input energy. That is an endergonic reaction. Obviously, an exergonic would be the opposite of that. Exergonic reaction, in this case, is the opposite of that. Okay, they're ones that release. So you think of this as a release of energy. Okay, that's a release of energy. And in this, what ends up happening is if you take that same chart that you need to draw, Here's our products, okay? Here's our reactants. Now we're going to have less potential energy down here with what we're finished with, okay? So we might have glucose, which is C6H12O6, and we're going to convert that into carbon dioxide and water. These two have less potential energy than this does. In the process, we're going to give off energy. This free energy allows us to do work. What is work? Grow, develop, things like that. This reaction here that I just drew, that's cellular respiration. It's taking glucose and converting it into carbon dioxide and water, in the process giving off energy that allows us to do work. That's what we're going to talk about here. And when we look at these two reactions, the endergonic and the exergonic, are linked to help us be able to carry out a reaction. That energy that was just given, now where does that energy come from to supply this? Most of the energy to drive an endergonic reaction must come from an exergonic reaction. So in other words, in order to build something, if I want to build muscle, I need to get energy somewhere. So building muscle takes energy. That makes it an endergonic reaction. But to drive that, to build muscle, I need the energy from somewhere. It can't come from nowhere. So what we're going to do an exergonic reaction involving a molecule known as ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. So ATP. And all that is there's an adenosine molecule, okay? And that's going to be linked to a phosphate, which is linked to a phosphate, which is linked to a phosphate. Okay? That's ATP. And ATP is the energy, it's the cash of the cell. It's what actually supplies us with most of the energy that we're going to need for any given organism. The last bond here, so when we look at an actual ATP molecule that we have, so we have our A, adenine, phosphate, phosphate, phosphate. This is the key. I draw that. There's the bond of energy. It's kind of like this. To hold these molecules together, this bond's really stable. They're tight together. It's a strong bond, okay? That's a strong bond. That one's pretty strong too. That one, it's loose. It's kind of waving in the wind. And so when that bond, it's easy to break. And when we break this bond, energy is going to be given off. Okay, boom, there's that energy that we can use. So we're going to use this to create energy. That energy that was just given off is then used in different organisms to do jobs. In us, in warm-blooded animals, we actually use this energy to warm our bodies. Okay, we use it to activate and transport material through the plasma membrane. That's the energy. All right, so ATP, you have it over here on your diagram. You don't need to know everything on this, but just realize here's the A part of it. This is the phosphate part, and it's, once again, this last bond here. That is what gives us the energy. When that bond breaks off, that's where our energy comes from. Okay? So when you have ADP, you add a P molecule to it. You need energy. When you do this, right there, that will create ATP, okay? And it is an endergonic reaction. So go ahead and write that down. That reaction I just did, write that down. Endergonic. Why is it endergonic? It requires energy. Endergonic requires energy. This reaction is used to store the energy released when sugar is broken down in the mitochondria. Okay? It's an ATP synthesis reaction. Where does this energy come from? It's going to come from breaking down sugar. It's going to be coming from breaking down glucose. And there are 4 steps to this reaction. I want to write these down right now or type them in. The first stage of this process is glycolysis. Oops. The second stage of this process is called cellular respiration. That's what we're going to study. And another example of doing this is photosynthesis. So these are not connected, but these are all examples of ATP synthesis reactions. These are, all 3 of these are ATP synthesis, synthesized means to create reactions. So glycolysis, cellular respiration, and photosynthesis are all examples. And we're going to look at these today. We're going to look mainly at that one and a little bit here. We're going to look at that one a little bit later on. All of them, their job is to create ATP. All right. So we can do this respiration, cellular respiration, which is exergonic. What does exergonic mean? Think to yourself. Exergonic is simply where energy is going to be given off. So we're going to take the energy in sugar and give it off, okay, in order for the cell to do work. And in this reaction, in a cellular reaction, ATP is used to store energy from the breakdown of sugar and then transfer that energy to parts of the cell where it is used to supply energy to do work for the cell. So when a ribosome needs energy, it's going to get it from the energy of sugar. Cellular respiration, the process is exergonic. If the process includes oxygen, it's called something different than when it's not. Cellular respiration is a process which the cell releases energy in glucose. That energy that's released in glucose, so the energy that we release in glucose, is going to be captured in the form of ATP. ATP is the cash for the cell. Use it for its purposes. Aerobic respiration involves many reactions that have to happen in a particular step. It's a step, do this, do this, do this, do this. The first thing we're going to look at is aerobic respiration or reactions that have oxygen. Okay? And this happens in certain reactions. So oxygen is needed when glucose is broken down in the mitochondria of eukaryotes. This is a key concept you need to write down, bullet, whatever. The only organisms that can do aerobic respiration, that means breaking down glucose with oxygen, with O2, is eukaryotes. Bacteria cannot do it, and they do it at the mitochondria. Okay, its job is to do it at the mitochondria. It requires oxygen, which is a key component, and it's the breakdown of glucose in a process called the citric acid cycle. And that's C-I-T-R-I-C, acid, and it is a cycle. Now, cycle, what does that mean? It means it's a step-by-step process, but what we end with is what we start with. It's a cycle. It's like a circle. Okay? And during this reaction, when oxygen is present, we're going to gain a total of 38 ATP. This concludes part 1 of this video. On part 2, I'm going to kind of show you this reaction. So go ahead and click and find video 2 now.